So low spin head design or maximum forgiveness. What makes each head that in terms of a structure and design, and which head is most relevant for you and why? So whether we're looking at low spin or maximum forgiveness, weight positioning is the real key. And you can see the size of the head is noticeably different between a low spin and a forgiving head. So where do we start? Well, first thing is looking at the size of the head here, the depth of the mass at the back here. They've got a heavy weight at the back, and that's removed as far as possible from the face as they can. What does that achieve? Well, the further back from the face you get, it's a bit like stepping your foot back and creating a deep stance. It gives you resistance to stability away from that front point, which is where the ball contact is. So by moving as much weight back as possible and into the perimeter of the head here, be it heel and toe as well, what you're doing is you're positioning the weight to resist against a load heel and toe and resist against the twisting of the head. So increasing the rotational stability of the head, and that reduces the gearing. For one, you get less shot shape, but it also means you're losing less energy to that head giving and twisting. So it's about minimizing the off-center contact distortion of the head rotating around the shaft. So that's one element of it. Some of it is also about, when we're saying about distortion, and this applies to the low spin models as well, is the rigidity of the structure of the head. So the stiffer it is around the frame of the face and the stiffer it is around the joins here, the less that head squashes at contact. So you get a certain amount of distortion, squashing and displacement of the head when the ball contacts. So essentially that club head takes that impact of the ball, but the mass around the perimeter keeps moving. So what that does, you're losing energy through sound, through distortion of the head. You're just basically dissipating some of that energy through the head as it squashes down. So the less it can move, the less it can distort, the more energy is transferred back into the ball rather than dissipated around the head. So it's harder to do with the weight back as it is forward. The more weight you move away from the face, essentially at contact, that back mass keeps moving and it squashes the head in a little bit, which is why you get a slightly higher launch with the weight back, because that keeps going, keeps pressing underneath, because it's down at the bottom, it's working that way through the ball. It can't go over the top where that head's coming through, so it works underneath and kicks the ball up a little bit, which is why the more forgiving you go, generally speaking, they do become just a little bit slower than the low forward weight that we'll get to in the low spin head. But it gives you margin of error off center. Massively key, especially if your strike pattern gets a little bit variable. You need all that help to keep that head solid, stop it twisting, and leave that head nice and stable through the back of the ball, keeping it in the fairway. So the other part of this is weight saving. We're talking about weight positioning, but by going as light as possible in the crown, as light as possible in the face, that allows them to position that weight the perimeter of the head. So that's why in a driver with the head size as it is, going to a composite allows you to go as thin and light as possible. You can go lighter than some of the titaniums. You're getting close in the metals, but composite is easier to manufacture a lighter, stiffer material than it is in metals. The face on some brands has gone to composite, but again, it's about saving as much weight as possible while keeping some strength and rigidity there. But the more weight can be removed from those parts, the more can be placed to the exterior of the head, the more stable it is, because you've moved that weight away from that contact point. It almost sort of creates a wall around that stops the head distorting, keeps everything moving down the line of the shot. Let's move on to the low spin head. So moving into the low spin head, one of the things that I've got both heads here, on the forgiving head there's a single weight at the back of the head, but on the low spin head we've got a weight at the front and a weight at the back. So what does that allow us to do? Well, ultimately, the two-weight position just gives a choice in this particular model of having a heavier weight at the back or a heavier weight at the front, dependent on how low spin you want it to be. But having that heavy weight at the front, we're moving the weight as low and as far forward as possible. So lowering the weight means that actually the center of gravity kicks down and forwards, which actually means it's easier to strike the ball on the upper side of the center of gravity quadrant of the head, and that gears spin off. So by moving the center of gravity lower, it actually makes it easier to take spin off. When it's further back, partly because of the way that head works underneath, it adds a little bit of spin, it's harder to get that low spin gearing. But by moving the weight down and forwards as well, the further forward it is, the less distortion of the head you get, less energy you lose, the faster it is. So low forward CG means low spin, but also means fast ball speed. And you can go back to a head like the SLDR that TaylorMade made years back, which was exceptionally fast and ridiculously low spin, but horribly unforgiving. Because if all that weight's at the front, you've then got nothing at the back to resist an off-center hit. So you get massive amount of gearing, you get massive amount of ball speed loss, but when you get out the middle, it goes absolutely miles. Not really where we want to be, and that's been softened back over the years. But equally speaking, that was a head that when it was good was unbeatable, which will be even hard to beat now as long as you get enough flight on it. We'll come on to that a little bit later on. But that low forward CG is a really key thing, and part of that, the size of the head. The smaller you make the head, the less that weight's back away from the face. So again, the less you've got that mass kicking the head underneath at impact, adding dynamic loft, adding a little bit of spin gearing. So it allows that weight to sit further forward, and the payoff is you just do lose a little bit of forgiveness. It's getting to a point where we're getting more user-friendliness out of lower spin heads. They're certainly safer out the heel and the toe, so some of that I guess, moderation of weight placement has meant a safer toe strike in particular to not knuckle spin off quite as much. But you're always going to get an element of that because there's much less stability of that mass at the back of the head like you get out of that Ping. So going back to some of the other elements, rigidity around the frame. With a low spin head, again, the less distortion you get, the less, especially if you catch it high on the face, the less that kicks back, the more it keeps that spin gearing down, but also keeps the launch angle down a little bit as well. So you tend to see a slightly taller head shape out of the smaller, lower spin heads. The footprint front to back goes down, but then the height normally goes up a little bit, again, allowing a little bit more rigidity to that frame and keeping that launch angle at spin down. But generally speaking, the vast majority about it is getting that weight placement down and forwards. So let's get in the bay and have a look at the data and see how much difference that really makes. So I'm going to start off hitting with the low spin head, and what we're going to do with each of these heads is hit them with the same shaft that I use in my gamer driver, same swing weight setup, and we've measured the lofts so they're the same exact measured loft of the face as well. So trying to keep things as consistent as possible. But I'm going to hit a few and talk about what the properties of these heads really are in terms of from a ball flight point of view and what you can expect to see out of each of them. So one element of this head is the footprint's quite small. So from a lot of the club heads that most players are used to seeing now, used to seeing a big club head behind the ball. This is noticeably smaller. It's not a small CC, we're still over 400 CC. So it's not like it's a small club head in historical terms, but actually relevant to the footprint of the Ping that we got over there, or a GT2, for example, of the Titleist range. It's going to look noticeably smaller. So what does that weight forward from a flight point of view really do? So one of the things you're going to notice with the smaller head, the weight forward head, is because that mass is right on the back of the contact point, it can often feel very solid. It feels like all the mass is right there behind the ball, as long as you strike it well. That shot in particular, solid hit, really feels like the ball punches off the club face, but it's not got a lot of spin. Now bear in mind, I play my gamer driver as a TSR3, 8 degree lofted up a little bit. This is a 10 degree GT4, standard loft position weight forward, and that's 1800 revs of spin. That's really not a lot. So what does that really mean from a flight point of view? Well, it means that the low spin, so every shot you hit that gets in the air will have some level of backspin. So you'd never hit a shot that's got top spin. Otherwise, if you had top spin, it literally would just fall out the sky. You'd never get any trajectory out of it. But low level of backspin means that the ball's not trying to hold on when it lands, so you get a lot of run out. But it also means you've got less lift on the ball, keeping it at the top of the flight. So low spin means that it's really traveling flat and forwards at the top of the flight. So unless you've got enough launch or ball speed to keep that thing in the air, it's trying to dip out the sky. So this is why the low spin heads generally tend to suit a higher club speed. Because you've got to have that club speed and ball speed to get it into the air in the first place, to get it up to the top of the flight. Because if you're not getting it to the top of the flight with a lot of elevation, with a lot of speed, it's not going to stay there. It's just going to go like a shot duck and parabola and fall out the sky. Then you're trying to get it into the air, you're compromising your delivery position. Whereas at high speed, height generally isn't an issue. So spin becomes far more important at higher speeds. If you've got too much backspin, it stalls. Low spin you can get away with. Now you might lose a little bit of carry, but you're generally always going to get the total distance. So prioritizing low spin at high speed means the ball flight's really stable, it's got a lot of forward momentum on it, it's not going to balloon up, and doesn't get stalled out, but you get that yardage. You can hit it pretty low. I'll try and bring this on down a little bit. So that last shot, 15 launch, 2000 spin, 290 at 154 ball speed. If I bring that flight down, we're at, okay, 155 ball speed, 12 launch, 1900 revs of spin, 289. There's half a yard in it. But the launch angle's 2.5 degrees difference. The spin's only 100 revs difference. The overall shot, the end result, apart from the fact that one's come out up here and one's come out down there, is broadly speaking the same. So at higher speeds, that low spin rate to ensure the ball stays going forward, really, really critical. There'll be a different story at lower speeds, but I will display later on. But essentially what this head does is it stops the ball getting too high in the air and just means it carries on going forwards. What do we do when we go to the forgiving head? So we're switching to the G440. Now we've chosen the Ping versus going for a more forgiving version of the GT4 because the Pings are known for their forgiveness. It's really what they've made their name on over the years. Consistency across the face, deep weight positioning. So whilst they are relative extremes in terms of head setup, I think it's important to go with a brand that everyone recognizes forgiveness rather than stay in the same brand itself. I thought that was the most appropriate one head for the test. But obviously it will have knock-on effects on what it does in ball flight. So let's hit a few, see how it changes. So a completely different visual behind the ball. Far, far bigger footprint. Now, for a lot of players, that's one of the elements of forgiveness is up here. That's going to give you confidence because there's a lot of club head to hit here. And just little things like the white marks on the face, they frame the center of the face well. Everything's trying to make it look as comfortable as possible for the player. So lots of real estate to hit. Yeah, but what does it do from a playing point of view? So one of the things that does change is that directness of feedback. Now, a lot of players, if you start going to a blade and irons, there's no forgiveness, but you get maximum feedback. So the more you remove weight from the face, the more you spread it to the back, you lose a little bit of that sensation of what's happened at impact. Now, for a lot of players, that's actually a good thing. We'd go for a head that doesn't tell you very slightly mishit it there. Some of that feedback off the low spin heads, you know the moment you miss it, you know it doesn't feel stable, it twists. On this head, it's almost like that weighting around the side just holds that head rock steady. You get a lot less sensation of distortion or twist on an off-center shot. Now, obviously, confidence-wise, that can be massive because actually, if you get up to a ball in the fairway that you didn't quite hit, but you didn't feel the miss hit, you get up there and go, oh, thought I'd be a bit further up. Never mind, I'm in play, rather than knowing the moment you've struck it that you've got it wrong, and then it's just how far offline has it gone. That can massively affect your confidence. So that sensation of stability at impact that the more forgiving heads give you, really, really key to feeling good about the club stood on the next tee. So it's where sometimes feedback and feel can be a negative. It really feels like I can hit this anywhere on the face and get away with it, which actually when you're on course can be a real positive. But it's had a pretty significant effect on launch angle and spin. So what we did before testing was we measured the loft on both these heads and we got them to exactly the same absolute loft when it's static. So moving that weight back creates a very different dynamic at impact. So when you've got all the weight at the back, as it strikes the ball, that mass keeps pushing forward. Essentially, that's still moving, squashes the head in, but essentially makes the head go that way. So you add dynamic loft, so you get more height. So we're at a launch and a spin, 15 launch and almost 3,000 spin. So spin on the one hand is a little bit of your friend in that it holds the ball flight a little bit straighter. It just helps the ball stay on line a bit. And it also means that when it lands, it doesn't get away from you. So if you hit it a bit offline, it doesn't keep going offline quite as much. So that's part of where some of that straightness comes from. However, we were talking about speed earlier on. At higher speed, that higher spin can really stall out the distance. Gets the ball launching up, stalling up, and then the wind can do whatever it wants to it, bats it away, but it lands dead. It's not got that forward momentum. So whilst you get a bit more height, you get a bit more spin, It does keep it straighter, does give you margin of error, but you're a lot shorter. So if I can match a ball speed of what I did earlier, we'll see if I can get the ball speed to where I got it with the GT4, which will require about 3 or 4 more miles an hour than that last shot. And we'll give a picture of what, a head of the same loft does to distance. And this is something that, from a fitting point of view, selecting the right head for not just optimizing distance, but giving you the right level of feedback and margin of error becomes the real art. Yeah, so 154 ball speed. So hit it harder, flight's gone up a little bit more. I'm now best part of 30 yards back from where I was earlier. Now we'll run the numbers in a moment. We'll go through that data, but that's a pretty significant change. Let's have a look at that. So with the data here, we've got to bear in mind that these two heads measured the same loft in a static position. In the clamp at the back, we can see there, face measured as square, the exact lofts are the same. So there are very different dynamics on the flight that we're seeing here. So as you can see from the launch angles here, there's best part of 2 degrees difference in launch angle, and spin rate 1,000 revs different, 50% difference in spin rate from the low spin to the more forgiving head. So what this shows is you can actually make a vast difference in ball flight characteristics based on the head that you choose and based on your dynamics through the ball. So angle of attack, 0.2 of a degree difference, and face to path, 0.4 of a degree difference. So again, delivery is very similar. It's purely the head style alone that's made this difference in ball flight. So why is that? Well, as we described earlier, that weight positioning and the way that reacts with the impact position, deep weight back, that carries on going forwards, works the head underneath, flights it up more. But you do gain that extra bit of stability off center. You put weight forward, keeps the ball flight down, stops the head working underneath, gears spin off, and at the kind of speeds that we are here, 104 miles an hour, there's a significant difference in total distance. So looking at the numbers here, we've got a little bit less ball speed from the more forgiving head, a mile an hour or a couple of miles an hour. Some of that is because it launched high, we've lost a little bit of forward energy. So the more it launches, the more energy is going up rather than forwards, so a bit less ball speed. So 2 degrees higher launch, 1,000 revs more spin. We've got 2 miles an hour less ball speed. Now, all else being equal, for 2 miles an hour ball speed, you're really looking at 3 to 5 yards. So the ball speed alone is a minor part of this. Carry distance, there's 8 yards difference. So this sort of higher speed, the upper end of the speed bracket, upper half, should we say, carry distance isn't dramatically affected by the different head styles. It's the run at yardage, the total distance. Now this is in dead calm conditions. If you put 1,000 revs more into wind, it's going to stall out and die and go nowhere. But in dead calm conditions, 8 yards difference on carry, but we then spread out to 23 yards difference in run out distance. So because the ball's getting up higher, spinning more, it's landing steeper, and it's got more vertical descent angle, more spin kind of grabs on when it lands, so it doesn't just chase out as well. So if you're at a higher end speed, that lower spin rate is what keeps that ball traveling forwards when it lands and stable through the air. So if you play somewhere windy, if you play somewhere that isn't soft ground the whole year round, that actually you want to maximize your total yardage, then that lower spin head does give you that. But at this sort of speed, at the upper half, it's quite significant total distance. If you get that head style and the spin rate wrong, then you're hurt a lot from total distance. Now if I flip this over and we go to a lower speed shot, so we've reined the speed back down. We're now at just under 90 miles an hour club speed. Again, same angle of attack, face to path number very, very similar. So again, the impact delivery, very, very similar. We again have got just over 2 degrees this time in terms of launch angle difference. So that more forgiving head has launched a little bit higher. And in this instance, there's a little bit more efficiency. So at higher speeds, the distortion of the head and losing a little bit of ball speed happens a far greater effect on the more forgiving head than it does on the low spin. And that now isn't really an issue. There isn't as much load on the head, therefore you've got less twisting, less distortion of that head, less energy loss. So the ball speed proportionally, very, very similar. But because we now get more height, that more forgiving head delivers a higher dynamic loft, creates more launch, creates more spin. for 1.5 miles an hour less ball speed because it was slightly slower club speed with the G440. I've actually gained 10 yards through the air because the flight was higher. So all of a sudden at a moderate or lower speed, height becomes your friend from a carry distance point of view. Yes, the low spin shot runs further. So it has run out, and we're actually with three yards longer run out, but we've lost 10 yards through the air. And match ball speeds, that's gonna become even bigger difference, and then the run out distance gets to, broadly speaking, the same. So if you're at a lower speed, the low spin head becomes far less relevant because other than delivering a massive amount of loft and trying to keep that flight as low as possible, which isn't normally the case at lower speeds, getting it up in the air, getting it up high, carrying well, that then becomes your key to consistency of yardage. Notwithstanding all the effects of stability off center, which we'll come on to in a moment. But just from a ball flight point of view, getting the wrong head style can significantly hamper your ability to deliver a consistent distance. So at low speeds, it's carry distance, and at high speeds, total distance. So what's the overall summary between the head styles? So to summarize, why would you choose this head over the low spin? Well, if your strike pattern's a little bit variable and you're looking for the head to give you as much margin of error as possible, then that deeper weight position really does help you off center. It's going to minimize any rotational twisting of the head at an off center strike. That then holds the flight a little bit straighter, and yes, you might lose a little bit of ball speed, but you're going to gain straightness. And from that, it's front-back distance discrepancies that are going to be minimized with this head. The only consideration you might have if you're at a higher speed, that you might want to drop loft slightly in the more forgiving heads because you're going to create more launch and spin, and therefore lowering the loft, the spin proportion is still going to be higher than a low spin head, but that keeps the peak height down. If you can get the spin to a reasonable level, then if the gain of forgiveness and the gain off center is enough, then you're minimizing your loss from a total distance point of view. That this head, for margin of error, confidence stood over the ball from a miss point of view, you're seeing that little bit of extra real estate behind the ball at address, that can really help the mindset from a forgiveness point of view, and just feeling like you're going to get a good result. But that definitely, not feeling a miss hit, but minimizing your front-back discrepancy. Switching to the low spin head, certainly if you're a high speed player, the lower spin heads definitely stand to give you a more stable ball flight because they minimize that launch and spin to keep the top of the flight down, keep it going forwards. And your ability to hit consistent distance of drives in particular will be augmented by the lower spin heads. Now there are different levels to this. You haven't got to go into something like a GT4, for example. Titleist do the GT3, Cobra do an LS, TaylorMade do the LS, Callaway do the triple diamond, Strixon do an LS. They all do that sort of model for higher speed play because ultimately, keeping the spin down actually gives more distance consistency, but you do have to find the middle of the face that little bit more regularly. So say if your miss pattern is heel toe across the face, you may want to consider a lower loft of the more forgiving option. If it's a little bit high low on the face, then actually the low spin models, as long as it's centralized, do retain pretty good ball speed. And it's actually more the rotational distortion versus the vertical one that's more of the issue when you go into the lower spin heads. That weight forward, you lose that back weight stability, but actually you retain quite a lot of vertical stability with these heads. So if you're a high or a low striker, the low spin head could still be a good option for you. However, if your miss pattern's heel toe, lower loft version of this head may well be the better option for you. So hopefully that's helped explain a little bit of the differences and why one head may suit one player versus the other. Again, moderate speed, a little bit more launch of this head, that's going to be a help as well. But hope you like the content. Hit the like and subscribe button. Let us know what you want to see us do. We're going to be filming more content through the second half of the year. So anything you want to see in particular, stick a comment in and we'll do our best to film it for you.